Now, here we are, Wednesday, July 6th, 2022. So, oh my gosh, I'm plain Janeing it today. Gotta do that every now and then. Let the skin all breathe, right? Oh. Plus, there comes a time for Ever Lady once a month. Today, I have been doing some experimenting in the kitchen, and I have this textured vegetable protein, and I attempted making, and I have an abundance of eggs right now from the chickens, and so I made custards with the yolks, and then I mixed the egg whites with the TVP a couple different ways, and boiled it in a bag, attempting to make like a sausage, right? A veggie sausage, a homemade veggie sausage kind of thing. Well, it didn't get hard enough to be like sliceable. It's crumbly though. It's like crumbly sausage. So I will brown it and crumble it over the soup I'm making today. I'm making a velvet cauliflower and fennel soup, and it has fennel and potato and a head of cauliflower and garlic and onion and some other stuff, some herbs, and anyway, it gets all cooked together and pureed down into a real velvety soup, and then I'll put the sausage crumbles on top of it. It'll be good. Be a nice lacto-ovo healthy meal. All right. So I think I'm going to read my cookbook, my culinary text here. So it's more than just that. This was a piece that I did for Lent. What year? What year was this one? This was 2021, so this was last Lenten season. This Lenten season, I had an injury, and I believe that it was inflicted upon me. And I wasn't able to do as much as I normally did, so I did a different practice this year. I read cards every day during Lent, and that's what got me back into card reading. And I wrote some letters, but I didn't write all the letters that I wanted to write. Anyway, this was last year's Lenten project in my kitchen, on my table, Lenten Tales of Culinary Traditions. And there's also, in this, I have a bibliography. I have a comprehensive bibliography of all of the texts that I referenced. I have a lot of photographs in here, and I have an index of all of the images, and then also I did a series of collage pieces during Lent in 2021, and it's the appendix of this, because this was written alongside while I was working on these collages. And then I used these collages to make note cards. I had some of them printed up. But the series of collages are called 40 Years of Media on Media. So I had 40 years of saved periodicals and calendars and things, and I used them to make these collages that were eerily, creepily timely. So I'm going to read this. I'm not going to share the images in here, because if this gets published, if I'm ever able to actually get this published, that will be kind of like the candy, right? You get to see the images. So I'm just going to read it. I had this copy printed. It's the proof that I used for proofreading. I had it printed at FedEx Kinko's. It cost me $75. No, it was more than that for this, with the color prints. It was more than that. Anyway. In my kitchen, on my table, Lenten Tales of Culinary Traditions by Larissa Dahroug. Self-published by Larissa Dahroug at the Kitty Pants Ranch, written during the Lenten season of 2021. Dedicated to all who hunger and thirst for justice. Table of Contents. Prologue, page 5, Chapter 1, Pasta fazool, Spaghetti Aglioiolio, and Risotto ai funghi, page 7. Chapter 2, Basic Bread, Pizza, Salad, and Choosing the Right Wine, page 15. Chapter 3, Mac and Cheese, Chowder, and Vegetable Soup, page 27. Chapter 4, Quiche, Frittata, and Baked French Toast, page 37. Chapter 5, Lentil Soup, Fool, Hummus, and Harira, page 43. Chapter 6, Masa Bread, Chili, and Tamales, page 50. Chapter 7, Pierogi, Halushka, Halupki, and Pascha, page 74. Chapter 8, Banana Bread, Trifle, Lemon Meringue, and Butterscotch Pie, page 85. Afterword and Acknowledgement, page 90. Appendix, 40 Years of Media on Media, page 93. Index, page 128. About the Images, page 132. Bibliography, page 138. Videography, page 138. About the Author, page 140. Other Books and Bound Works by Larissa Dahroug, page 141. Prologue. In July of 2020, Omar and I celebrated our 20-year wedding anniversary. I can't say time flies, but it hasn't dragged on either. In many ways, I still feel in my heart like that 21-year-old in the wedding photos, but I'm not. The truth is, that woman doesn't exist anymore. Parts of her I miss, but for the most part, I'm good with the woman I've become, much wiser and certainly less naive. Growing up, meals during Lent were a big deal. Like most American Catholic families, it was unheard of to be a vegetarian, and eating fish or no meat on Fridays was a huge sacrifice. When I became vegetarian almost 15 years ago, it was a big deal. No one in my family could imagine what I ate or how I was going to survive without meat on my plate. And it drove a wedge between us. To them, it was as if I were celebrating Lenten Fridays every day, and it was more than they could comprehend or approve of. It made breaking bread together difficult, to say the least. It hurt to have my personal health decision used against me. In the first year after Omar and I married in 2000, before I cut out the meat, I was working very hard to try to make our new family feel cohesive and unified. It was hard, maybe even impossible. His mother and father were Muslim. His mother's family is largely Anglican and lives in the UK, and we still don't know his father's family. They are mostly in Egypt. Back then, my family was close-knit in each other's business. They found foreign many of the ideas and customs of my husband's family, and my husband's family certainly felt the same toward mine. So I compiled recipes of family favorites into a word processing document and organized an intercontinental quilt project in an attempt to feel more connected. This past 2021 Fat Tuesday, the day before Ash Wednesday and the beginning of Lent, I hung the resulting quilt from the project on a wall in our home on the Kitty Pants Ranch. For most of the past decade, it was folded up in the hope chest my maternal grandmother left me. Looking at the squares, I was touched by how many of the women who had participated in the Quilt Square Exchange are now either dead or no longer married into the family, and how estranged I have become from those still living. Meshing such disparate cultures is not an easy task, and the truth is, Omar and I have become an island over the years, not really close to any of them. I found it's just easier that way, though it's been harder for me than him. He was never close to any of his family anyway, but me, I was very close to my relatives, regardless of how close in proximity we lived. Reflecting on these relationships at the opening of Lent, a season that is dear to me as a Catholic Christian, I felt a sadness. Omar only celebrates because I do the cooking and otherwise observe. It's vicarious for him and not something serious. And now, because of the current health pandemic, there isn't even the option of celebrating with strangers. The quilt got me feeling a bit nostalgic, and I pulled out the old cookbook I compiled as a new bride over 2 decades ago. Looking through the binder of pages typed on my home computer and printed on novelty paper purchased from some office supply store, I was struck by how many of the recipes I no longer make or now make in drastically altered ways to accommodate my predominantly lacto-over-vegetarian lifestyle and or our changing tastes and resources. I say predominantly because as a woman now in her early 40s, I have started to add back in some seafood to support shifting hormones and dietary needs. But eating land animal flesh still makes me ill, so as much as my tongue enjoys it, it's better for me to pass. For the past decade, I have engaged in a special art series as part of my personal observance of Lent. A couple years ago, I added writing a book to that observance. Looking through the old family cookbook, I decided it was time to look at it with a more mature heart and eyes and try again. A number of years ago, I asked my mother to rewrite the book with me. I wanted her to do the traditional meat variations of family favorites, and I wanted to do a vegetarian version. I thought it would help bridge the divide my change in diet had caused, but for some reason she was never interested, and the project has been sitting on the back burner ever since. So here I am, still married to the same man, well after 20 years, largely estranged from my family, celebrating the holy season by myself, yet again. With my grandparents all passed on now, perhaps a culinary journey back through the years will lift my heart. I hope you enjoy the stories, but even more, I hope you enjoy the meals. Peace of Christ be with you and yours now and always. Amen. Now let's eat. As I always am, Larissa. Chapter 1. Pasta fazool, spaghetti aglioiolio, and risotto ai funghi. For the past decade, whenever I asked Omar what he wanted for his birthday dinner, he answered pasta fazool. I told him he needed to choose something different this year. His birthday falls during Lent, but after 10 years, I think it's time for some variety. Anyway, the dish is a classic Italian comfort food and is prepared in a couple different fashions depending on from where in Italy your family comes. There is a more soup-like white version without tomato, but includes chicken or meat stock. I had it once at a restaurant. I had ordered it at other Italian restaurants in the past and had not been disappointed. So upon ordering, I expected something similar to our family dish, but was surprised when the dish was served and was nothing at all like the Lenten favorite I was accustomed to. When I made a strange face, the waiter laughed and explained the difference. He said it happened all the time. The dish was good, but I prefer the way my family prepares it. My mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother made the meat-free red version during Lent. When I use the term red to describe this dish, it refers to the red color of the tomato sauce. I say this to clarify I'm not using a derogatory reference to peoples living in the New World when tomatoes were brought back to Europe. The tomato is widely accepted to have been first introduced in Italy in the 1500s. At the time, it wasn't widely accepted as it was unlike any other fruit or vegetable that was popular or indigenous to the region. There was also skepticism about the plant because of its origin. The conquistadors returned to Spain with tales of evil or satanic peoples of the New World, and this caused much skepticism among the devoutly Christian populations of Spain, Portugal, and the rest of Europe. The white version of the dish is derived from traditional Italian cooking, predating the introduction of either tomatoes from the Americas or noodles from the Far East. The term white does not refer to skin color or otherwise derogatory descriptions of any group of peoples who might prepare this version of the dish. White, in this case, refers to the color of the bean used and the slightly whitish color of the broth from the starch of the bean and the pasta. In the white version, the stock for the soup is traditionally started by browning either mild sausage or ground wild game such as rabbit or pheasant. Other ingredients in the white version include onion, garlic, herbs, and escarole. Italian cuisine predating tomatoes and pasta was largely a diet of beans, garbanzo, cannellini, etc., grains, rice, farro, spelt, etc., wild game, rabbit, pheasant, duck, venison, leafy greens, and pungent herbs like oregano and arugula. There's a wonderful cookbook by Francine Sagan called The Philosopher's Kitchen that goes in depth about traditional Roman and Greek cooking. Many of the herbs described in her book are now extinct or extremely rare, so neither dish, red or white, is purely anything without outside influence. Like I said before, I prefer the red version, especially now that I consume a mostly lacto-ovo diet. It's pretty easy to put together and is rather inexpensive, making it a great option for larger families on a budget. Pasta fazool means pasta and beans. Whether you make the red or white version, both use the same bean, cannellini beans. I usually make a Caesar or tossed salad to accompany the dish, otherwise the meal is a bit on the starchy side, and as a grown-up, I need the roughage. The bean and pasta, the grain, make a complete protein dietarily. If it's tough to get your kids to eat salad, you can also slip in some chopped fresh spinach. It wilts in quickly and doesn't really change the flavor much. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Everyone likes this dish, even people who don't like beans. When I was in 8th grade, I had a very not Italian boyfriend, Scott Hayes. The first time he came over to the house, my mother laughed and told him we needed to make sure he and I weren't related. See, my mother's mother, Anna Morrow, made all the Italian dishes she learned from my grandfather's mother and father, Angelina and Anthony Morrow. Angelina and Tony were from a small village west of Naples called Avellino. My grandmother's maiden name was Leeds, and her mother's maiden name had been, wait for it, Hayes. Scott was terrified at first and didn't know what to think. If we were related, it was quite far removed, certainly not a first, second, or even third cousin. My grandmother would have known. She was a genealogist. Anyway, Scott didn't like beans, but when we sat down to dinner, he ate 3 bowls. It took 2 bowls for him to figure out there were beans. Once he finally noticed, he picked them out of the 3rd bowl. My mother teased him about the 2 bowls of beans he had already eaten. We all laughed. So this is how you make it. Ingredients: 1 pound ditalini pasta. Ditalini looks like short little tubes. If you can't find it, you can use the smallest shells or orecchietta. You don't want elbows or orzo or springs or anything else. It's just not the same. Ditalini is about the same size as the beans. That's what you're looking for, something about the same size and similar in shape. 18 ounces, 1 jar, crushed tomatoes, plus same amount of water or something around that size. 4.5 ounce, 1 tube of tomato paste or something around that size. 5 to 7 ripe Roma tomatoes diced fine. 1 medium-sized white onion diced. 4 cloves of garlic minced. 5 or 6 fresh basil leaves torn, cut fine, or 1 teaspoon dried basil. 6 sprigs fresh oregano or 1 tablespoon dried oregano. 1 bay leaf, 1 bunch fresh parsley chopped fine, 1 tablespoon crushed red pepper flakes, 1/4 cup olive oil, salt and pepper to taste, 1 or 2 cans of cannellini beans undrained. You can use butter beans in a pinch if you don't have cannellini beans. They're a little bigger, but have a similar flavor and texture. 1/2 cup grated Parmesan cheese, optional. 1/2 pound fresh spinach, chopped coarse. A large fresh salad of your choice, a loaf of fresh bread, a bottle of Nebbiolo wine. Nebbiolo grape varietal makes a delicate floral red with mineral notes. It pairs very well with the texture and relative sweetness of this dish. Directions: put a large pot of salted water on to boil. In a small saucepan, place your beans, undrained, and cover. Don't turn the burner on under the beans just yet. In a 3rd large pot, start the sauce. I like to use my wok because it heats so evenly. Add the olive oil, bay leaf, onion, and crushed red pepper flakes and stir over medium heat until the onions become clear and glossy. To the onions, add the garlic, oregano, and tomato paste. Leave fresh oregano on the stems. As the sauce cooks, the leaves will release from the stems and you can remove them. Until then, essential oils from the stems will release into the sauce, offering their flavor. Stir the paste into the oil and cover for 5 to 8 minutes over medium heat. Once the paste is bubbling, add 1 glass of red wine to deglaze the pan and stir it through thoroughly. Add a bit of salt and black pepper at this point as well, but just a bit. You don't want to add all your salt at once. Now add the crushed tomatoes and the fresh diced tomatoes plus a jar of water. I just used the jar that held the crushed tomatoes. Stir together and raise the heat to medium-high. Check your pot of water. Once it is boiling, add the ditalini, allowing it to cook. Cook halfway. Once it is half cooked, drain the pasta and add it to the pot of sauce that should now be bubbling as well. Turn on the burner to heat the beans. The beans are already cooked. You just want them to be warmed all the way through before you add them to the pasta and sauce. Once the pasta is tender, add the basil, parsley, warm to hot beans, and Parmesan cheese. If you are not serving a salad, or if your kids won't eat salad, this is the time to add the chopped fresh spinach as well. Stir it all together and taste for salt. Add salt if needed and serve with salad and bread. This recipe serves up to 6 people. Here's another Italian Lenten favorite, spaghetti aglioiolio, or spaghetti with garlic and oil. This dish comes together very quickly, so is always a good choice when my mother got home late in the day from work or school, or when I got older, when I got home from work or school. When I was in college, I never got to have the American experience of going away to school. I was accepted to schools in different states as well as in state, but out of driving distance. But I ended up staying in the Metro Detroit area and living at home for 3 reasons. 1, I really liked College for Creative Studies, CCS. It's a great art institution with a world-class curriculum and colorful history. 2, CCS offered me the biggest scholarship. And 3, my parents didn't want to let me go anywhere. While in college, I worked 4 part-time jobs totaling over 40 hours a week, along with my full-time class load and commute from the suburbs to Detroit for classes 4 days a week. My mother was in college at the same time at a different institution. After her graduation, she became employed as a secondary school teacher As long as I was living at home, I was expected to pitch in and prepare meals 3 days a week for the entire family of 5. Whether during Lent or the rest of the year, this was a dish I frequently made because of how quickly and easily it comes together. The most time-consuming part is making the salad. Growing up, my family ate this dish during Lent, but as an adult, I learned it is more commonly prepared in Italian cuisine at Christmas as a course in the tradition of the meal of the 7 fishes. Again, this is something that depends on where in Italy your family comes. My family never celebrated the meal of the 7 fishes, so I cannot really comment on that tradition. At Christmas, the Italian side of my family made ravioli or stuffed shells with meatballs, tomato sauce, brociole, sausages, and Italian wedding soup. We also had spaghetti aglioiolio, or aioli, as we simply called it, during Lent. So this is how you make it. Ingredients: 1 pound, 1 box of spaghetti noodles, ½ cup of high-quality olive oil, 1 head of garlic minced, 6 sprigs of fresh oregano leaves pulled from the stems and chopped, or 1 tablespoon of dried oregano, 1 bay leaf, 4 tablespoons of crushed red pepper flakes, or 3 fresh large horn peppers diced and seeded, 1 large bunch of fresh flat leaf Italian parsley chopped coarse, 1 large white onion minced, 1 can or jar of good anchovies in oil minced, or 1 can tuna drained if your kids think anchovies are gross, 1 cup grated Parmesan cheese, salt and pepper to taste, optional, half a bottle of dry white wine, Caesar or tossed green salad of your choice, a loaf of fresh bread, a bottle of Lambrusco. Lambrusco is a light carbonated Italian red wine that is slightly lower in alcohol content than still wines. It is a style of wine my pappy said his mother made for the table. It is lovely with the sharp, pungent flavors of this pasta dish. Directions: put on a large pot of salted water to boil. A nice variation is to add about half a bottle of dry white wine to the water as well. In a large, wide, non-stick skillet, put the olive oil, bay leaf, anchovies, or can of drained tuna, onion, and pepper flakes, or fresh diced and seeded horn peppers. Horn peppers are hard to find. I rarely see them. Stir over medium heat until the onions become glossy and transparent. To make this dish more or less arrabbiata, angry, adjust the amount of peppers you use. Once your water is boiling, add your pasta and allow to cook to the desired tenderness. That's up to you how you like your noodles. If you want, you can use thin spaghetti or bucatini, but regular old spaghetti noodles are, in my opinion, the best in this dish. You could also get real fancy and make your own spaghetti noodles, but that is a whole other process and adds a lot of prep time to this otherwise quick dish. While the pasta is cooking, add the garlic, salt, and pepper to taste. Once your pasta is done, drain it well and add it to the skillet with the olive oil. Toss well, coating all the pasta evenly. Then add the oregano, parsley, and Parmesan cheese. Serve with a salad of your choice, a glass of Lambrusco, and a fresh baked loaf of bread. This recipe serves 4 people and can be stretched to serve up to 6 people if you add half a second box of pasta to the recipe. Now, this is another Italian dish I sometimes make during Lent: risotto ai funghi, or rice with mushrooms. Growing up, my family did not make this dish. It's possible it's something my great-grandmother Angelina may have made or eaten, but it is not a dish that I have any memory of anyone in my family having prepared. I learned how to make this dish after reading a novel one weekend. Omar and I took a little spa getaway when we were reuniting after a short separation 10 years into our marriage after his father passed away abruptly from pancreatic cancer. It was hard on our marriage and no one wanted us together. We navigated his father's death and the fallout on our own with no lack of uninformed, mean-spirited, and self-serving advice from everyone around us. Muhammad passed away in early December 2009, and over the next 12 months, we spent a good amount of time living apart. By the following Lenten season, Omar and I were living together and working to heal together in spite of all the people who were desperately trying to pull us apart, while also dealing with the challenge of moving his mother, suffering from early onset dementia and substance abuse, in addition to the grief of being left a widow, across the country to be closer to us. She fought everything that was in her best interest and was preyed upon by unscrupulous family members and friends. You would have thought she would have been kind and accommodating to a son and daughter-in-law who were trying to be family, but no. She has never liked me and has always been difficult, frequently stating she just knew one day I would become a Muslim, otherwise I would be her kefir or divorce her son. My father-in-law, as well, My father-in-law, as well as he and I got along, told me he expected me to be his wife's servant once he passed. Adding insult to injury, I wasn't even permitted to be with my father-in-law and husband when my father-in-law passed because my mother-in-law told me I wasn't part of the family and demanded, "You need to leave and go back and be with your people." It was horrendously hurtful and contributed greatly to the temporary separation in our marriage. The separation was Omar's desire, not mine, and no one I knew or met was a safe place to land in friendship or fellowship. Anyway, in the room at the hotel resort where we stayed for our spa weekend, there was a shelf full of books. I think the book was The Patron Saint of Liars by Anne Patchett, but I might be wrong about that. What inspired me to learn risotto was a scene from the novel where the main character is stirring a pot of risotto. The theme in the scene is that the dish takes constant supervision and much care to prepare properly and is a labor of love. The character in the story has an inner dialogue about how this dish is a special meal for her and her spouse. Like I said, it may have been a different novel. I read so many novels around that time, seeking relationship wisdom and outside perspective, free of personal bias or persuasion. Whatever book it was, I remember the emotion of the scene and the dish the character was making and thinking to myself, gee, I think I'd like to give that a try. I love mushrooms. Plus, the meditative process appealed to me, as did the knowledge I had learned about traditional Roman and Greek cuisine from Miss Sagan's book, which I mentioned earlier. In her book, The Philosopher's Kitchen, Sagan discusses the different grains used in Italian cuisine pre-introduction of tomatoes and pasta. Based on her text, I had tried my hand at preparing farro, which was very tasty, but I had not tried anything with rice. Italian dishes featuring rice use a short grain varietal called arborio, originating from the town of Arborio in the Piedmont region of Italy. It is starchier than other varietals with a dense middle and a lightly nutty flavor. My maternal grandfather, Joe Morrow, also known as Pappy, told me how his mother, Angelina, had taught him how to wild forage for mushrooms, snails, and herbs. I had recently taken a workshop on mushroom foraging and had even worked for a short time assisting a retired mycologist who made his living selling exotic and wild forage mushrooms and other such ingredients to artisan restaurants and specialty markets in the California North Bay. Mushroom risotto is very appealing to me for a number of reasons. My pappy and I were very close and had a wonderful relationship until the day he died. Learning this dish was a chance to focus on good memories and feelings in my life and move forward with my husband. I knew the dish was tasty because I had had it at restaurants. When I got home from our weekend getaway, I looked up a few different recipes, revisited the text of Miss Sagan's book, and tried my hand at making it. It's now a dish I make frequently throughout the year, but most certainly during Lent. It is time-consuming, but well worth the effort. The process varies slightly depending on what variety of mushroom you use. I will address this in the directions. Also, if you are not lacto-ovo-vegetarian or are otherwise uninhibited by dietary restrictions on meat, you can make this in a non-vegetarian fashion. I will also address this in the directions. So this is how you make it. Ingredients: 2 bottles white Italian wine. I like to use a Verdicchio. 8 cups of water or chicken stock if it's not Lent and you're not vegetarian. 2 cups uncooked arborio rice, half a cup of olive oil, half a stick of butter, 1 head of garlic minced, 1 pound of fresh mushrooms chopped coarsely. I usually use white button mushrooms because they're easiest to find, but it's also delicious with black trumpets, cremini, young portobellos, oyster, chanterelle, morel, and or any other mushroom from the Boletus family. Porcini mushrooms are traditionally used and are probably the most commonly known culinary mushroom from the Boletus family of fungus. Shiitake mushrooms can be used with good results, but I would refrain from woodier mushrooms or other Asian varieties. Dried mushrooms can also be used. Truffle can be added, but in much smaller amounts given the rarity, pungency, and cost of the fungus. Ultimately, it's really a matter of taste and preparation. I'll discuss this further in the directions. 2 strong sprigs of fresh rosemary, 1 large shallot minced, 1 bay leaf, salt and pepper to taste, a handful of fresh Italian flat leaf parsley chopped coarse for garnish, side salad of your choice, fresh baked loaf of bread. In a large stock pot, put the water or chicken stock, 1 bottle of wine, minced garlic, rosemary, bay leaf, and salt and pepper. If you are using dried mushrooms of any variety, add them to the pot as well, making sure they are broken into pieces. If you are using fresh button or cremini, you may add them also to the stock. Cover and bring to a rolling boil, then reduce heat but keep covered. If you want some soup, the soup's ready, but I haven't finished making the garnish. Okay. If you are using fresh oyster, chanterelle, morel, or any of the boletes and or truffle, add them to a separate deep and wide saucepan or smaller stock pot with the oil or butter. Stir over a high heat using a slotted metal spoon until the mushrooms are tender. Then remove the mushrooms using the slotted spoon, straining out as much of the oil back into the pan as possible, and set the mushrooms aside to be added back in later. You don't want to overcook fresh mushrooms, otherwise they'll be chewy and tough and not very pleasant in contrast to the rice. If you're using fresh black trumpets, take care to carefully clean any debris from them. Their nature makes it so there are often small pieces of evergreen duff among the delicate tube-centered fungus. Running them under water can break the mushrooms into small pieces and rinse them down the drain, so I use a damp paper towel on my hands to clean them. Chop fresh trumpet mushrooms fine and set aside uncooked to be added at the last moment. Black trumpet mushrooms are difficult to source fresh since they have a very short growing season, specific environmental needs, and are not found widely. Because of their delicate structure, they cook very quickly and with very little heat. To the oil in your pan, now add the butter, shallot, and uncooked rice. Since the point of this dish is to develop the starch of the rice as it cooks, I do not bother to rinse the rice before adding it to the fat in the pan. Stir the rice continually in the fat over medium heat until the rice starts to become glossy. Now, slightly turn down the heat under the rice. This is a slow process when done correctly. Using a large ladle, add 1 scoop of the hot stock at a time, stirring the rice continually with a wooden spoon. Add additional stock as the rice absorbs the liquid. You may avoid adding the bay leaf or the rosemary stems to the rice. The leaves will fall off the rosemary stems as the stock boils. The rosemary leaves, any mushroom pieces that may be in your stock, and garlic are expected to be mixed in with the rice. Be sure to recover the pot of hot stock while you are stirring the rice to reserve as much as possible from evaporating, making sure you have enough hot stock to use. The stock must be hot when added to the rice. Cold or room temperature stock will not develop the starches that give this dish its characteristic creaminess. Surprise, there is no cream or cheese in risotto. The creaminess is because of a chemical reaction between the fat, rice, and hot liquid being continually stirred. You will see the rice change in appearance. Periodically, taste test the rice for doneness and salt content. Once the rice is tender and creamy and the salt is where you like it, add in any mushrooms you previously set aside. Plate immediately. Garnish with the parsley and shaved truffle if you have it. Serve with side salad of your choice, fresh baked bread, and a glass of verdicchio. Put any remaining stock you may have in a jar and keep it in the fridge or freezer for use in another dish. Be sure to use any unused stock within 3 days if you don't freeze it. This recipe serves up to 6 people. Any leftover risotto will keep for 1 day. It will never be as creamy reheated as it is fresh. The starches shorten and break once the dish cools. After more than a day in the refrigerator, the texture isn't very pleasant at all, though it is safe for consumption for up to 3 days. So yeah, I really like mushroom risotto. I do. I really like it. It's really good. But when I have it in restaurants, I always have to ask, is it vegetarian? Or did you use chicken stock? Because chicken stock is very common. Very, 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 very common. And it adds a layer of richness. So I've also seen the risotto served with a baked or broiled chicken breast over the top or as a side. For people who feel like they need to have it. It's good. So when I make risotto or risotto, depending on if you're continental or not, I'll make a salad that has a seed in it because a seed in the green makes a complete protein. Yep, it sure does. So, anyway, happy cooking.